The most painful childhood wounds are not always loud. Sometimes they are silent. Sometimes the deepest damage doesn't come from harsh words or obvious cruelty. It comes from something much quieter, from not being noticed at all. Imagine a child standing in a crowded room. They aren't screaming. They aren't misbehaving. They're just waiting. Waiting for someone to look at them. Waiting for someone to ask how their day was. Waiting for someone to say, "I see you." Now imagine that moment repeating itself for years. Children who grow up without consistent emotional acknowledgement often carry a secret into adulthood. It's not visible, it doesn't leave bruises, but it shapes how they see themselves in ways they may not even understand. When a child's emotions are repeatedly overlooked, their mind begins to adapt, not because they are weak, but because they are intelligent. The brain is built for survival, and if attention and warmth are inconsistent, the brain learns to expect inconsistency. Over time, that expectation becomes belief. Maybe I shouldn't ask for too much. Maybe my feelings are inconvenient. Maybe I'm easier to love when I'm quiet. This is how invisibility becomes internalized. Psychologists often explain that children build their sense of identity through reflection. A caregiver's response acts like a mirror. When a child laughs and someone laughs back, they learn joy is welcome. When they cry and someone comforts them, they learn sadness is safe. When they speak and someone listens, they learn their voice matters. But when those mirrors are missing, something subtle happens. The child does not stop needing connection. Instead, they begin shrinking their needs. It might start small, a drawing brought home from school that goes unnoticed, a story about their day interrupted by a phone call, a birthday remembered late. None of these moments alone seem catastrophic, but childhood is built from repetition, and repetition teaches the nervous system what to expect. When acknowledgement is rare, the brain shifts into protection mode. Research in developmental psychology shows that consistent emotional responsiveness helps regulate a child's stress system. Without it, stress hormones can become more active, leaving the child in a heightened state of alertness or quiet anxiety. From the outside, they may look like the easy child, the independent one, the quiet one who doesn't demand much. Adults often praise this behavior. What they don't see is the cost. Because the quiet child often becomes the adult who struggles to take up space. They walk into rooms feeling like they should stay small. They hesitate before sharing opinions. They downplay achievements. When something good happens, instead of celebrating, they brace themselves to be overlooked. This isn't a personality flaw. It's conditioning. Attachment theory suggests that early relationships form a blueprint for how we expect others to respond to us. When caregivers are attentive and consistent, children develop a secure sense of connection. But when responses are absent or unpredictable, children may form insecure patterns. Some grow up anxious, constantly seeking reassurance. Others become emotionally distant, deciding it's safer not to depend on anyone. Both patterns can stem from the same early lesson: connection is uncertain. Adults who were frequently ignored as children often report a quiet sense of loneliness that doesn't disappear even when they are surrounded by people. They might have friends, partners, colleagues, yet still feel unseen. Why? Because loneliness isn't only about physical isolation, it's about emotional recognition. You can sit at a dinner table full of conversation and still feel invisible if no one truly hears you. There's also a paradox. Many individuals who grew up feeling unseen become deeply attuned to others. They develop strong observational skills. They notice small changes in tone, facial expression, mood. They become empathetic, sometimes extraordinarily so. As children, they learned to scan the environment carefully. It was a way to predict when it was safe to speak or when silence was wiser. That awareness can become a strength in adulthood, but it often comes with exhaustion. They may tune into everyone else's needs while ignoring their own. Another pattern appears in achievement. Some ignored children become high performers. They work tirelessly, chasing success not purely for passion but for recognition. The underlying hope is simple: maybe if I accomplish enough, I will finally be noticed. Yet even when praise arrives, it may not fully land. Compliments feel temporary. Achievements feel fragile. The old belief lingers: attention doesn't last. Others go in the opposite direction. Instead of striving harder, they disengage. If no one seemed to care before, why try now? This can manifest as low motivation, difficulty setting goals, or feeling disconnected from ambition. It's not laziness, it's protection against disappointment. Emotional neglect is often misunderstood because it doesn't always look dramatic. There may be food on the table. There may be no shouting. There may be no obvious harm. but the absence of emotional presence leaves its own imprint. Researchers studying long-term outcomes of childhood neglect have found links between emotional invisibility and increased risk of anxiety, depression, and relational difficulties later in life. The common thread is not weakness. It is unmet developmental need. Humans are wired for connection. Acknowledgement is not a luxury. It is a requirement for healthy identity formation. When children are consistently acknowledged, neural pathways associated with safety and resilience strengthen. When acknowledgement is lacking, the stress system may become more sensitive. Over years, this can shape how the person responds to conflict, rejection, or intimacy. In friendships, the former invisible child might become the reliable listener, the one everyone confides in, the one who shows up, but they rarely ask for support themselves. On the surface, they appear strong. Internally, they may wonder why no one checks on them the way they check on others. In romantic relationships, patterns can intensify. Some cling tightly to affection, fearing it will disappear. Others keep emotional walls high, convinced closeness will lead to dismissal. Both responses are attempts to manage the same fear of being unseen again. There is another layer that often goes unnoticed: identity confusion. When a child's emotions are not mirrored back to them consistently, they may struggle to define who they are. Preferences, opinions, even dreams can feel blurry. Without reflection, self-concept forms more slowly. This can lead to a lifelong search for validation, not because the person is shallow, but because early confirmation was limited. They may look to others for cues about what to feel or how to think, unsure whether their internal experience is valid on its own. And yet, despite all this, there is something remarkable about human resilience. Many adults who grew up feeling invisible eventually become deeply self-aware. They read, they reflect, they seek therapy, they question patterns. The very absence they experienced often fuels a desire to understand themselves more fully. Neuroscience tells us the brain remains adaptable throughout life. New experiences can create new neural connections. When someone who once felt unseen speaks up and is met with understanding, the nervous system records that moment. When they express emotion and receive empathy, it registers safety. These small interactions begin to challenge old expectations. Healing rarely arrives as a dramatic transformation. It often looks like subtle shifts. Saying, "I need to talk," setting a boundary and watching it be respected. Allowing yourself to feel pride without immediately dismissing it. Each of these moments contradicts the old narrative. It is also important to acknowledge that many caregivers who failed to provide emotional presence were not intentionally harmful. Some were overwhelmed, some were struggling with their own unresolved wounds, some were never taught how to respond emotionally because they, too, grew up unseen. Understanding this does not erase the impact, but it can loosen the grip of resentment and open space for growth. Breaking cycles begins with awareness. When someone recognizes how invisibility shaped them, they gain choice. They can decide to show up differently in their relationships. They can practice offering acknowledgement to others. They can create environments where voices are heard. Every time a formerly ignored child becomes an attentive parent, partner, or friend, the chain weakens. There is also power in naming the experience. Many adults minimize their past because nothing terrible happened. But the absence of something essential is itself significant. Oxygen is invisible, yet vital. Without it, we cannot thrive. Acknowledgement functions the same way. If you grew up feeling overlooked, healing may begin with something simple, but radical: validating your own experience. Saying to yourself, "What I felt was real. My need for attention was not selfish. My desire to be seen was human." Celebrating small achievements can become a form of reparenting. Listening to your own emotions without judgment can rebuild trust with yourself. Surrounding yourself with people who genuinely respond can reshape expectations over time. None of this erases the past, but it reduces its control over the present. And here is something worth remembering: invisibility often sharpens empathy. Those who know what it feels like to be unseen often refuse to overlook others. They become the ones who notice the quiet person in the room, the ones who ask, "Are you okay?" The ones who remember birthdays and small details. Pain can generate wisdom, but wisdom does not require perpetual self-sacrifice. The same compassion extended outward must also turn inward. If you were the child who waited for acknowledgement, you are not broken. You adapted. You survived in the best way you knew how. That adaptation once protected you. Now, as an adult, you have the opportunity to choose differently, to speak, to ask, to celebrate, to exist without apology, because being seen is not something you must earn. It is something you inherently deserve. And perhaps the most powerful shift happens when you realize this: the story of invisibility does not end with childhood. It transforms the moment you decide to recognize yourself. But here's the question that lingers: if early silence shaped so much of who you became, what might happen if consistent acknowledgement shapes who you become next? What parts of you are still waiting to be noticed? That answer may change everything.